Hello everybody, NIO Lifer here. Let me set the scene for everybody first. First of all, I'm not at the shopping center. This is actually a local park near the hotel where I'm staying. And we are over a bridge. And this is pretty popular among the locals here, what I was told with. So there's a nice river or lake, whatever that is. And a lot of people, of course. All right, we set the scene, and now let's talk about something super important. Meanwhile, I'll give you guys a tour together with me. I've never been here before. This is my first time. And let's explore a local parks together. This is not in the city center. This is outskirts because I chose a location very near a train station. And the result is easy, convenient, and traffic every day. However, it is pretty far out from the city. The good news is it's very quiet here, so it's not hard to focus and recover. The reason I say recover is because the last few days I've been pretty much under the weather, even though I made quite a few videos. In reality, I was not as well as it should be because air quality was too bad. This is the one thing here in China that they are not doing well compared to the rest of the world. Air quality, I guess the only country that's the worst is probably India and Bangladesh and those kind of places. But, okay, let's come back to the actual topic. Before we go, let me just get an overview of this place. I have really no idea where we are. It looks like a ring-shaped park. So if that's the case, I just walk following the path here. Let me turn it around and we can talk about the most important topic of the day. All right, everyone. So what's the most important topic of the day? It's probably on everybody's mind. And that is the delisting of NIO or potential delisting of NIO. So why is this an important topic? Because there's a lot of rumors that a lot of companies that is Chinese sourced and listed in US will be forced either to delist or voluntarily must delist due to the trade war. It is an entirely legitimate question, and I believe there's a distinct possibility for every Chinese company to delist from the United States capital market. However, I see that most people do not actually understand how the financial market works. Instead, a lot of false information, rumors, and other things. I'm not expert, okay? Don't get me wrong. I've never worked in investment banking. I've never underwritten IPOs. So what I'm telling you is what I know just as a investor in the US market since the early 1990s. So that's my background. In fact, my very first investments in the share market was in a small company called Intel. So you know basically that I know something about this thing, but I by no means an expert. This is what I'm trying to say. So don't sue me. This is not legal advice. This is not financial advice. I want to preface all that because half of my audience is actually Americans. Oh, by the way, 95% of my viewers have not subscribed. So please do subscribe. I know you probably found my channel through some funny short videos, but you know what? This is a pretty cool channel. We are growing rapidly. Please subscribe. Let us grow together. And one day we can get NIO share price to $100 per share. Or if they do delist, the equivalent of that, basically. All right, let's come back to the delisting issue. Oh, wait. That looks interesting, but I just follow the main road. All right, delisting in United States. What impact does it have on the share price on NIO, or what will happen? First of all, you guys need to understand, NIO is fundamentally a different kind of company than ZEEKR. I happen to know ZEEKR pretty well because before I invested all my money in NIO, ZEEKR was my number 2 candidate, actually. I have a whole list of shares that I was interested in investing in. ZEEKR was actually at the beginning the number 1, but after I watched a NIO Day 2024 video, I decided to give NIO a closer inspection, and then decided afterward, after 3 months research online, that NIO is the better choice in the long term. In the long term, keep in mind, I'm not a short-term investor. In the long term, than ZEEKR. ZEEKR is probably worth twice the money, and NIO is about 10 to 20 times the money. That's the main difference. Now, what is with ZEEKR here? Let's start with ZEEKR first. The reason why ZEEKR is voluntarily going private is because ZEEKR is owned primarily by by the parent company, or in that case by the guy who owns the parent company. All right, Geely Group. So Geely Group is a huge conglomerate that grown out of a very modest background. Geely probably makes some of the best day-to-day cars in the world. Actually, I really like the Geely Galaxy series, by the way. Lynk & Co is fine, but the ZEEKR cars are really amazing. And they cracked the code for volume production. And ZEEKR is part of the big group, basically the modern version of Volkswagen Group. And ZEEKR is one of the brands. ZEEKR is the equivalent of the Porsche, what we want to become. That was the whole idea. However, ZEEKR is majority owned by Geely already, okay? When they make a takeover offer to going private, when they say going private, in this case, or delist the shares, means basically the majority shareholder offer to take over everybody's share at a certain price. In their particular case, I think it's $27 or $26, I don't even know exactly. And then, in exchange, you hand over the shares you have in ZEEKR shares in the United States. And then Geely take over those shares and become virtually 100% shareholder of the company, and then the company can vote. And of course, if they own all the shares, they can decide about the outcome of the vote, and the company can decide that the shareholders can vote to remove the listing of the shares on a certain exchange, in this case, US exchange. You can only do that when you have the ability to legally do it. Therefore, the voting rights of those shares are essential. Now, what they're doing is actually pretty smart, because what they did, they listed shares a year ago, and they tried to earn money from the capital market in the United States by raising money here in the United States, over there in the United States, at a better valuation. That's what they hope for. However, Chinese brands and Chinese companies and Chinese cars are not popular among US investors. In fact, they are very popular among short sellers. So they didn't expect that. So they didn't get the valuation they wanted to get. Instead, they got a much, much worse valuation than they deserve. And therefore, when they're taking over the company now, they're actually getting a bargain. It's a bit like this. You are trying to sell something you own that is worth $100 for $300 because you think this thing is worth $300 in a different market. So you bring your product to this other place to sell for $300. Instead, locals value your thing not as $300, instead it's at $50. So you don't like that, and after a while, when nobody wants to buy at $300, instead everyone only buying at $50, you decide, you know what, I will take all my products back from the distributor, and I pay them $60 to take over the stock, and I'll just bring the stock back and sell it locally for $80 or something like that. This is the best way I can describe it. So basically, ZEEKR majority shareholder Geely Group, which is controlled by one guy, and you guys can Google his name and everything. I'm not going to do that. I'm in the park. So he is bringing back whatever he sold to the public at a fair valuation, let's call it that way, and he buys them back currently also at a relatively fair valuation. However, I believe it's actually undervalued by 50%. So he's actually getting a bargain. Now, you as a shareholder in ZEEKR can decide, say, I'm willing to participate or I'm not willing to participate. You don't have to sell. That's another thing people don't understand. You can choose not to sell the shares. But if you don't sell the shares and the majority shareholder clearly intend to delist the company, then your shares will be delisted, which means, simply speaking, you will no longer be able to buy and sell the shares under the US regulations on the open exchange market in the United States. That's all that it means, delisting. It doesn't mean that you lose your shares, okay? This is the very important difference. If you don't own your shares outright, for example, through a broker, maybe that broker has certain rules and regulations that prevent you from owning anything that is not officially listed and traded. Yeah, then you must sell your shares. However, under normal circumstances, if you own the shares directly, then it is not a problem for you to own those shares forever. Forever. Literally forever. Until the company goes broke or until the company becomes listed again. Because the company can come back and get a listing again. That's another thing. And then, of course, you can still raise cash by issue new shares or reduce share count by buying back shares. All this is still possible, even as a non-listed company. Don't get me wrong, okay? So the listing of a company merely means you are legally allowed to offer your shares to be bought and sold on the regulated market among normal average investors. Because the listing requirements make it this transparent and obvious for everybody to know what the share price is valued at by the public, by the general public. That's all that is. Now I have spent a lot of time talking about ZEEKR. The reason is because the ZEEKR is the precedence for the entire car industry in this regard. And now let's talk about the real thing, which is NIO. Sorry, I'm getting distracted because the park is quite nice actually. Maybe I'll give you guys a round view. Such a pretty nice park. Quite nice. Beautiful. Greenway. So this is the Greenway. Okay. So 11 minutes in, I haven't spoken a single word about NIO yet. Okay? For good reason. I want to drag this out as long as possible to waste your time. No, that's not what I'm trying to do. Once you understood what's happening with ZEEKR, you can understand the difference between ZEEKR and NIO. First of all, NIO is not majority owned by one specific entity inside of China. That's not the case. Who owns how much of NIO? You go do your own due diligence. All I can say is Abu Dhabi. No, okay. So basically, this company has a completely different shareholder structure. Second of all, this company's origin is completely different compared to like BYD or Geely or Huawei, to name few very big Chinese companies in the same space. There's no military link and there's no direct government link directly, and no controlling stake shareholder that is originating from the Chinese government. And so because the shareholder structure is so different, NIO management was very smart to do something upfront long time ago that from many shareholders' perspective considered as useless and waste of money, which was triple listing. All right. I think a lot of people, even people who own shares in NIO for quite a long time, might not be aware of the fact that NIO shares are actually triple listed on 3 super important and super liquid international financial markets. So you got New York, then you have Singapore, then you have Hong Kong. It's not listed in China. All right, just keep that in mind. NIO is not listed in China. So technically speaking, it's an internationally listed global EV company that just happened to have all this operation in China, mostly at least. That is how the structure is like. And the shareholders are diverse and international. Let me repeat, international. And they follow international rules and regulations wherever it is listed. When a company has triple listing, sorry about that. I better go get some drinks. So when a company has triple listing, what happens is that you actually have to comply with 3 different exchanges regulatory requirements. Means the audits, means the bookkeeping, it's the same thing basically. So basically everything what you need to do to comply with the listing requirements, you have to do it 3 times with 3 different exchanges worldwide. And all 3 exchanges are highly regulated, very reputable. And you guys can even Google the opening ceremony, the trading, first day trading, for example, for NIO shares in Singapore. It actually comes with a lion dance and everything, pretty cool. Similar to opening a restaurant. Okay, so when the company like NIO lose its listing, what happens? you can either lose your listing in US because the government says so. They just say you're no longer welcome here. Here's a kick on your ass. Get out of here. Yeah, sure, it can happen. Then nobody can buy and sell your shares after the listing has been delisted. But it does not mean that you lose your ownership. This is the key ingredients here. You still have the ability to take control of those shares directly in the United States. Every person who owns shares in a listed company in the United States has the legal rights to take possession of your shares. This is also the fastest way to kill naked short selling. You take control of your own shares, direct control of your shares. Don't leave your shares with your broker. So that's a very important thing. A lot of people wouldn't do that. That's one thing. But more important is, if you lose the listing in one company, in one exchange, you do not lose the listing in all other exchanges. That is not correlated. All right? As long as you comply with the local rules and regulations for the listing, you keep the listing. And you have to worry about other things. Actually, things you should worry about is your daily operation, like how many cars you sell, how many customers you convert, and your operational efficiency and so on. Listing requirements is actually the last things the company take care of from day-to-day operation basis. So the worst case scenario, let's go through some scenarios here. The worst case is that NIO loses the listing because NIO does not want to lose it, but NIO is being forced to delist. Then those shares will either be directly returned to the shareholders and say, here, hold your shares. The brokerage wouldn't hold it anymore, or the exchange says you no longer can sell or buy those shares on my exchange because you lost your listing. But normally what happens is you get an exchange offer for cash or for another share listing or share registered in a different exchange, in this case Singapore and Hong Kong. So it's a bit troublesome, but it's entirely doable. It's just an accounting stroke of keys. That's it. You don't lose your ownership of the company. Let me repeat. Delisting of a company's shares does not automatically remove the share ownership. Okay? This is very, very important. I'm tired. I think I'm just gonna take this seat here, finish the video here. Nice. Yeah, it's okay. And the lighting comes from the right direction. So you do not lose your ownership of the shares that you rightfully own. However, here comes the kicker. This is what you should be waiting for watching such a long ass video. If delisting really happens in the United States, all the naked shorts actually have to be squared. It is incorrect that all the naked short sellings will be removed and that the failure to deliver would not matter. It is not true. It's like a casino. When a casino closed down, every table has to be cleared. All the bets has to be cleared. And that means anyone who owes anything, one way or another, has to pay his debt. The short sellers needs to pay his debt. The short sellers will have no choice but to cover the shares before the delisting happens, because you owe those shares to somebody else you borrow from to sell. That's how it happened. If the shares no longer trading due to delisting requirements, you have no choice but buy those shares and return the shares to the rightful owner, so that the shares can go private or go sent to another exchange. Those shares are very valuable, but as long as the shares are still trading, you have leniency. As long as you keep your requirements of borrowing in line, you're paying the interest rate, for example, for borrowing shares to sell, they will let you borrow those shares. But once the exchange says no more, no más, basically, as the Americans say, no más, amigo, then when that happens, everybody has to clear the table, okay? It means explosion of share price for NIO if you really get a forceful delivery, if it's been enforced on everybody. This is a long ass video. Okay, in general, don't worry about it. In detail, if the delisting really happens because it's been forced to, share price should actually go up, not going down, due to the short selling and naked short selling in NIO share price. That's the reason that you didn't see the price drop after the ZEEKR information came out. Last but not least, the most likely scenario is the voluntary delisting. in case of voluntary delisting, your shares gets transferred to another exchange, or you can hold your shares privately. Like every employee of NIO, believe it or not, has a little bit shares in the company as part of the compensation packages. And most of those employees are inside China, and actually their shares are not listed here and not traded actively. But they still own those shares. They are still rightful owners. Just because they are rightful owners of the shares doesn't mean they can trade here, because they don't have the listing requirements fulfilled in China. That's it. So you will be treated no different than basically the Chinese staff. How bad can it go, right? Okay, thanks a lot for watching. This is probably too long a video. Sorry about that. And I wish you one of the best days ahead. And I think personally this is going to stir up the pot, and there'll be a lot of misinformation, but ultimately the truth will prevail and NIO shareholders win. Right now, I think if they want to take my shares, yeah, you can have them for $20 a share. Take them, 20 bucks. Okay, I paid $4.55. You can have them for 20. Now let's negotiate. Offer 19, 1950, 1955, 1958, blah, blah, blah. You know, this is how it works. It's a market, like a vegetable market. I got what you want. You have to give me what I want. Otherwise, I'm not changing hand of what I own. That's how simple it is. Even if NIO wants to take the shares from my hands and offer me $20, I can still choose not to sell to them, for example. But that's not going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. Instead, I think they will just focus on the operational efficiencies and worry about the new models delivered, because they have 7 or 8 models coming up that are getting a renewal. That means sales push, that means clearing of stock, and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of work to be done by the NIO employees. So there are other things they need to worry about. Delisting is the last thing they need to worry about. And as a shareholder, so do you. You know why you're a shareholder and not an employee? Because you don't have to worry about it. Yeah. As a shareholder, you can take a walk in the park on a Saturday. As an employee, they're still busy today selling cars. Okay? Don't forget about it. Okay. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great day. Bye.